because this generation, they just want shit handed to them, bro. It's like, you my manager, you supposed to house me and pay me monthly and all. I was like, bro, you ain't done shit for that. Like, bro, you need to struggle a little bit. You need to feel like, hey, shit, I want to be a champion. You need to grind. You know, you need to sacrifice. You know, because I'm telling you, when you get there, be worth it. See, when I came up through the back door, bro, I was getting paid pennies, man. But it kept me fucking hungry. It kept me starving, man. And I'm looking at everybody else getting it, man. Andre Berto getting it, getting paid millions. I'm getting paid $8,000, $5,000 for 10 rounds. You know what I mean? I'm like, okay, when I get there, ain't no going back. Ain't nobody gonna stop me. And that's where my determination came, because I'm like, yo, when you fighting for the championship of the world, right? I went over to fucking England and fought for the world championship, bro. I made $26,000. That ain't shit. 26K. Take home. Right? And I'm like, hey, the most money I ever had. And I actually had $11 in my bank account when I fought for that title. $11. Literally. Taking care of 2 kids, and I had a wife. So, bruh, you couldn't deny me, bro. $26,000, and then after that, I made $90 in my first title defense. So, like, if somebody win a world title, bro, and they see this type of money that I made, they're gonna be like, yo, this is bullshit.
Ladies and gentlemen, members of the jury, members of the Roll the Tape film crew, those were the words of Timothy Bradley Jr., former world champion. Timothy Bradley, as you just heard him say, only had $11 in his bank account at the time that he went overseas to challenge for a world title, with a wife and 2 children. Took home a grand total of $26,000. After winning the title, in his first title defense, walked away with $90,000. Those were the words of Timothy Bradley Jr., former world champion, analyst, and overall a real guy. That's what Timothy Bradley said when he was on Greg Hackett's podcast or platform or show. And the context was basically that Tim Bradley started feeling disenchanted when he tried his hand at being a boxing manager. And I can identify with every single word that Tim Bradley said when he talked about his perspective of being a boxing manager. Everybody at this point knows that I'm also a former boxing manager in the sport of boxing. And I can identify and relate to what Tim was talking about. And Tim Bradley also talked about the different mentality that the fighters, pro boxers, pro fighters today have compared to in the past when he was coming along in the ranking system. And he's right. But the purpose of this video, because I am the only and the most qualified content creator in the YouTube boxing community to speak on the business perspective of the sport of boxing. And it's very, very befitting and relative for me to speak on what Tim Bradley said. And I want to first say this. I hear a lot of people on YouTube, whether it be content creators, whether it be boxing fans who are not content creators, talk about fighters' purses and how much the fighters get paid. And most of them wasn't even talking about all of this before I got here. Some of them probably was. I wasn't here. Before I came on YouTube, when I start breaking down the numbers and how fighters get paid through pay-per-view buys and ticket sales. Y'all remember that? Some of y'all forgot about that 2 years ago when I came on the scene and doing basic arithmetic of ticket sales and pay-per-view buys and the grand totals and revenue streams when we talk about boxing promotion. But the point I'm making is a lot of people keep talking about, oh, this fighter making 1.5 million. Oh, this fighter's making 7.5 million. This fighter made 30 million in his last fight. Everybody keep talking about all these numbers. Have never conducted one transaction in the business of boxing. So people really don't understand. I'm not criticizing no content creator. I'm not criticizing boxing fans. I'm just laying the foundation to illustrate a point. It's easy for people to just throw numbers around based on what they read or heard from a journalist, because that's where people be getting these numbers from, right? When reporters and journalists come out and say this fighter is reportedly going to make X amount of dollars, haven't seen any contracts, haven't seen any agreements on commission filled documentation, have never seen any documentation from the promoter and or the fighter most of the time. And it's easy for us to throw around big numbers and talk about how much money fighters are getting paid. But what about the part that you don't see? The part that I know as a boxing manager, that I have experience in being a witness of, and even a conduit of it in my business transactions with some of the fighters that I managed. And when it's time for them to get their check, when all the expenses have been paid out, and the psychological effect and the emotional impact that it has on a professional boxer, when it's all said and done, after all the reporters talk about how much money they're going to get in their purse before they even fight, and then to get the check when it's all over, when the fight is over, when the expenses are paid out, and it's time to deposit that check in their bank account. No one talks about that. So I appreciate Tim Bradley speaking on that. It's easy to throw around numbers like it's monopoly money. But what about what the fighters got to deal with? The sacrifices they already make, all of the prerequisites that they have to endure to even compete, let alone win once they get inside the ring, and then going outside of the ring, coming outside of the ring, and having to face the harsh reality of how much money they're actually taking home. So I think that as boxing fans, as a boxing community, we must be more sensitive when we start talking about money and numbers of fighters. That's why you rarely ever hear me talk about how much the fighter's getting paid. And I don't, because I do this, I used to do this for a living. I understand how it works. So those numbers that people be reporting on don't excite me. I use those numbers, though, to educate you, the boxing public, the boxing community. When you hear me talk about fighters' purses, I use that and those references for educational purposes. And I wanted to speak on this for the second point that I want to make, is that people are running around here talking about Gervonta Tank Davis is going broke. And my question becomes, what difference does it make? Gervonta Tank Davis make way more money than an average YouTuber in boxing talking about someone else's purse. There's not a YouTuber in the niche of boxing that makes more than Gervonta Tank Davis. So with that being said, no one's actually qualified to speak on what Tank Davis' pockets look like and whether or not he's going broke. Because people are criticizing Tank Davis based on hearsay. Again, no evidence, no facts. How can we verify and fact check what you're saying if you're going by what you heard? So all I'm saying is, let's just say Gervonta Tank Davis is going broke. Okay, which has nothing to do with not one boxing fan in the world, but okay, he's going broke. You going to help him out? You going to send him a couple dollars? You going to contribute to him taking care of his children? You going to pray for that brother? If you believe in the Lord, you going to pray for him? If he's going broke, if he's having financial failures and he's in financial destitute, you're not? So then what we talking about then? And Gervonta going broke might not be the same as a content creator or a boxing fan going broke. I'm talking about the average boxing fan going broke. Some people one paycheck away from being broke in real life. But Tank Davis might not be actually going broke compared to somebody else. But what difference does it make? Let's start getting back to talking about the sport and the business of boxing. Well, I'm qualified to talk about the business, but I'm just saying in general, the sport of boxing. Let's stop talking about these fighters' purses. Let's stop talking about how much a reporter claimed that this fighter's going to get. Let's stop doing that because it's not important. It's not important. These men and women have a job to do. This is their profession. Their income, sources of revenue should not be the topic of discussions. It shouldn't be. Not from an average boxing fan who has a YouTube channel. Where they do this at? Oh, I do know where they do this at, YouTube. Because it becomes messy. And then we forget that professional fighters have families. And I'm saying have families, the ones that this information can impact the most, like children. That's why I like when Bradley said he had a wife and 2 children with only $11 in his bank account. Gervonta Tank Davis has children. I don't know how old his children are, and they might not be old enough to have a YouTube channel right now, but this is locked in, what we say in the public. What happens in 5 years? His child gets older and becomes a teenager. And hear somebody talk about the financial woes that his father or her father, I think he has 2 daughters, right? Her father had to endure that impacted her as a child. So we have to be mindful of us talking about the money. None of y'all qualify for real, to talk about the money because you haven't conducted any business transaction in boxing. That's number one. And number 2, right now, none of us on YouTube as content creators make as much as Gervonta Tank Davis. So we're not even qualified to speak on that man's pockets or anybody's pockets for that matter. Let's just stick to boxing. That's all. You know what? I'm doing way too much talking. Don't take my word for it. Roll the tape.